So I know some people have misunderstood this, but we showed the list earlier, and I think maybe the way we did it, people interpreted this as you delineating these are the greatest moments. But you picked out certain dates and time, and I want you to explain how you came up with this.
Yeah, so it's a great moment is kind of the hook, but then it's great moments that were surrounded by great days. The kick six, for example, or the Bush push with Notre Dame USC in 2005, they were like iconic moments made for, incredibly memorable games, but they were surrounded by great days of college football. It wasn't just that game on those days. In 2005, Notre Dame USC was surrounded by Penn State and Michigan decided on the last play. Wisconsin beat Minnesota on a punt block with 30 seconds left. Or if you look at the kick six, that happens after Ohio State beat Michigan on a stops 2-point conversion in the last minute. So the mission was to try to find the most fun, greatest days in college football history, which is a huge task, admittedly. But through some data that I have about with games and the AP poll and upsets and scores, I was able to kind of narrow it down to a long list of like 300 days with just what kind of metric benchmarks in terms of this day had this many upsets, this day had this many games go down to the wire, and then from there I just kind of had to investigate and narrow it down, and ultimately came up with a list that had some obvious choices and maybe some ones that people don't know about.
I'm interested. Maybe this is the former reporter in me, but I used to love digging in deep, and when I was a reporter. Don't laugh. You had to go to the library. You just didn't use all the tools you have now. But, you just started, and it was hard to concentrate because you started looking at stuff and you got distracted. You were reading the articles. So tell us what it's like doing this work in 2021. How do you do it?
Yeah, it certainly makes it a lot easier, for sure. I mean, you have great resources out there like College Football Reference, the Sports Reference library of sites, which I use a lot. Newspapers.com is a site that has access to lots and lots and lots and lots of old newspapers that I use frequently. You can look up, if you want the box score from any game, you can look it up there. So, for me, it's this database that I have built on my own through a bunch of sources to narrow down games by, upsets in terms of AP rankings or, 1-point games or 7-point games, whatever it is, stuff that I've compiled over the years, and then, jumping off and looking up, just pulling up a newspaper page from, say 1995 and looking at, their wire stories from top 25 games in a day will give you a good picture of was it a great day or was it a forgettable day. So I was able to kind of slowly narrow down and then build out the days that I actually included through those kind of sources.
And I know, Matt, you discovered this a couple of years ago. I can't remember what year it was. Maybe it wasn't that long ago, but we all said Saturday morning, terrible day, boring day. Go to the lake, take a walk, and then upset after upset occurred. So as you're doing this, I mean, you're talking about in 1 and 2 here, two of the most memorable moments in college football history. Does there have to be a hook to it because as opposed to just being unexpected?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. The top two are kind of great moments, great memories. Number 3 was January 2nd, 1984, which was when Miami beat Nebraska on Tom Osborne's failed 2-point attempt to win the game instead of tie it. And, Miami jumped from number 5 to number 1. So it was a day where, okay, not only did this great game happen, but context around it had to happen. Number 2, Texas lost by 1. Number 3, Auburn won by only 2, didn't score a touchdown, so they didn't win the national championship. Illinois, number 4, got blown out in the Rose Bowl. So, you had games like that. You had ones that I just didn't even realize looking back, like, November 9, 2002, you had the Bluegrass Miracle with LSU beating Kentucky on the Hail Mary in the last play, happened on the same day that Ohio State beat Purdue on Craig Krenzel to Michael Jenkins on 4th and 1. Happened on the same day that Texas A&M upset number 1 Oklahoma. Happened on the same day that a bunch of other things happened. So you had days like that. And then, I think you mentioned a few years ago, it was a day, November 12th, 2016, was the only day in college football history in which 5 AP top 10 teams lost to unranked opponents. So that's the type of day you wake up, you think it's going to be forgettable, and all of a sudden, number 2 Michigan, number 3 Clemson, number 4 Washington, number 8 Auburn, number 10 Texas A&M all lose to unranked teams. So it's a nice combination of days that kind of lived up to the hype, which kind of like Notre Dame USC in 2005 that had a ton of build up, lived up to the hype, and then the rest of the day kind of rose with it. And then you have surprise days like that day in 2016 where we go into it expecting nothing and it's total chaos. And those are also kind of sometimes the best types of days of college football. So through the poll data that I had access to, and just some other exercises that I've done in the past, I in a previous job I did a ranking of the top 100 games ever a few years ago, and that kind of helped inform me for this too. So it's kind of an accumulation of different articles I've done in the past and this type of research that kind of uncovered days that clearly stood out based on a variety of factors.
Yeah, going back to something you mentioned a minute ago, and I'll try to leave myself out of these conversations, but you brought up a memory. I covered that day in 90, I guess it was January 1st, 94, or January 2nd, when the famous Tom Osborne go for 2. I was covering the Sugar Bowl that day, and for covering Auburn, and at the end of the night, Auburn coaches thought they had won the national championship, and they were in for to show you how things were different. I came back from New Orleans the next morning, Matt, and we were waiting for the ticker tape. I mean, not to date myself, but that's how it was. And we got the AP poll or whatever poll it was, and I immediately called Pat Dye, and he did not know, because I called him within seconds of seeing it, he didn't realize that Auburn not only didn't win the national championship, but didn't even move in the polls.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how, we're used to now, we've grown accustomed to the BCS era and the playoff era where we have an instant answer and it's clear. But, before 98, and especially when you go back into the 80s and 70s, you're waiting for a poll to be published. Nobody had any certainty. I wrote about January 1, 1966 in here.
Oh, wow.
Until 1968, the AP poll and the coaches poll did not crown their national champions after the bowl games. The bowl games didn't count for the championship. So, in that era, the bowl games were, exhibition games, especially for the championship. But in January 1, 1966 was the only exception in that time when the AP decided, because the top 5 teams were all in action on New Year's Day, which was kind of uncommon at the time for various reasons. Notre Dame not playing in bowls, the Big Ten didn't let teams go to the Rose Bowl 2 years in a row. So that year in particular, the AP decided to crown its national champion after the Bulls. And it's also the only time then that the number 1, number 2, and number 3 teams in the AP poll all lost on the same day. So it was a similar type of situation in 84. It just happened to be literally the only time until 1968 that the AP crowned its national champion after the bowl games and used those bowl results. Happened to be one of the most chaotic days ever, where UCLA upset number 1 Michigan State, LSU upset number 2 Arkansas, Alabama was the number 4 in the polls, upset number 3 Nebraska. Alabama vaults to the national championship, and it's only because the AP decided to start counting the bowl games. So, times have certainly changed in terms of how the national championship's decided, and that we have, kind of several examples in this story of recent national championship games didn't make this because they're on their own day, and I had to take into account more than one game on one day. So it's kind of these old New Year's Day New Year's Days that decided the national championship that made the list. You
just said something that, and I have to leave it here because we've run so long here, but Matt, it's just shocking even now to remember that that Notre Dame didn't go to a bowl game until when? The late 90s, late 60s, I guess, and the Big Ten did not let you go back to the Rose Bowl. How crazy is that?
Well, people say that bowls are exhibitions now. It was especially true in the past. It's wild how times have changed, and it took until the 70s really, and the 65 season, 66 New Year's Day was like the start of it all, and it's just changed so much, and now we're back to talking about bowls not mattering again, and it's all about the playoffs. So it's kind of crazy how every era of college football, it's changed so much in terms of how much we care about the national championship, how much we care about bowls, and all of that. So it's fascinating to see.
Matt,